What would you do if you secretly regained your hearing and discovered that your fiancé was speaking ill of you behind your back? Daniel Wright, an influential real estate entrepreneur from Dallas, Texas, lived through exactly that nightmare when he decided to pretend he was still deaf to find out who truly loved him. What he overheard from his fiancée shattered him inside, but what he heard from his unassuming housekeeper changed his destiny forever. Before we continue, write in the comments which city you are watching us from. We care about how far our stories reach. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss this incredible story. Rain hammered against the windshield of his silver Bentley as Daniel drove home from the most exclusive charity gala. At 35 years old, he owned one of the leading real estate development firms in the country, and that night he had landed the biggest deal of his career. The city lights blurred past the window as he lowered the radio volume slightly and listened to economic news praising the success of his latest investments. His phone vibrated, and the name Victoria Hale, his fiancée, appeared on the screen, but he chose not to answer. He preferred to get home and tell her in person about the multi-million-dollar contract he had just signed. The traffic light turned green, and he accelerated down the main avenue, unaware that these would be the last sounds he would hear for a very long time. Suddenly, the headlights of a truck that ran the red light blinded him completely. The crash was brutal. Everything became twisted metal and exploding glass. The last thing he remembered was the deafening impact before darkness swallowed him whole. 3 days later, he woke up in University Medical Center, surrounded by wires and machines. His head throbbed with unbearable pain. His left arm was in a cast, and bandages covered his torso. Victoria sat beside him, her eyes red from crying, holding his hand as she spoke to him. Daniel watched her lips move, but he could not hear anything. He tried to respond, but the words came out wrong, as if they did not belong to him. Panic set in when he realized that the silence was not temporary. Then Dr. Michael Reynolds entered the room with a serious expression, speaking slowly, without Daniel being able to understand a single word. Victoria covered her mouth, understanding the news without needing to hear it. Daniel knew immediately. His life had changed forever. The doctor's expression said it all. He had completely lost his hearing. The days that followed became a nightmare of silence and learning. He had to communicate through gestures and written notes, feeling as if he had fallen into a deep pit with no way out. Victoria tried to comfort him, but Daniel noticed her impatience whenever she had to repeat things in writing. The doctors explained with drawings that the impact had severely damaged his inner ear and that the chances of recovering his hearing were minimal. His real estate development company would now have to function with interpreters and assistants, something he had never imagined experiencing. Business meetings turned into frustrating, almost theatrical scenes, where the man who once dominated every conversation now depended entirely on others to understand what was happening. The man who had managed several $1 million with a single phone call now struggled just to order breakfast in the hospital. The irony was cruel. He had built his fortune by listening to every detail, every opportunity, every threat. Now he had to learn how to move through a world without sound. When he left the hospital 2 weeks later, he faced a reality more frightening than any financial crisis. His private residence in Highland Park, Dallas, once alive with music, conversations, and business calls, now felt cold and empty. It was Victoria who hired a housekeeper to help him adjust to his new condition. She was a young, simple woman named Grace. She was around 28 years old, with dark brown hair pulled back into a simple ponytail and gentle eyes that radiated a warmth Daniel had not felt in a long time. Unlike Victoria, who seemed uncomfortable with the situation, Grace communicated with him naturally and patiently. She wrote clear messages in a notebook, smiled at him with genuine compassion, and never showed annoyance or pity. She even left small notes with words of encouragement in places where she knew he would find them. Her presence began to bring an unexpected sense of peace into Daniel's disordered life. Still, nights remained the hardest part. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, remembering the sounds he had lost, his friends' laughter, the constant movement of the offices, and even the ticking of his grandfather's old clock. Victoria slept beside him, yet Daniel felt more alone than ever, trapped in a silence that cut him off from the world. During the day, he put on a show of strength. He kept his back straight and his gaze steady, but when he was alone, the tears came without restraint. He wondered whether Victoria still loved him, whether his friends from high society would see him the same way, and whether his business empire could survive without his direct leadership. Grace, who often stayed late tidying the house, sometimes found him awake and left a cup of hot tea beside him with a simple note saying that everything would be all right, Mr. Right. Those small gestures became the only moments of relief in his new life. What Daniel did not yet know was that his world was about to change in a way he never could have imagined. The first months after the accident tested his patience and pride like never before. In public, he maintained the image of a confident leader, with impeccable suits and the same steady stride as always. Yet every business meeting turned into an exhausting effort, where he depended entirely on interpreters to understand what was being said. His partners, who had once admired him for his sharp mind and decisive nature, began to look at him with a mix of pity and barely concealed impatience. During meetings, Daniel noticed how some of them spoke among themselves without including him, convinced that he would not perceive those exclusions. Victoria accompanied him to those events, always elegant in her designer dresses, but he sensed the tension in her smile each time she had to explain, again and again, the condition of her fiancé. The high society of Dallas, Texas, which had once welcomed them as a perfect couple, now treated them with forced politeness that Daniel could feel without needing to hear a single word. His image as a strong, untouchable man began to crumble little by little. In the privacy of their home in Highland Park, Dallas, everything changed, and Daniel had to learn how to move through unfamiliar territory. Victoria, once the glamorous fiancée who shone beside him at every party, now took on responsibilities that clearly made her uncomfortable. She had to handle important calls, translate conversations, and remain available at all times to help him communicate. Her patience wore thin quickly, especially when Daniel asked for clarification on complex work matters. By contrast, Grace developed with him a natural, fluid way of communicating, anticipating his needs without ever making him feel like a burden. She prepared his meals exactly the way he liked them, organized the home office so he could work comfortably, and always kept paper and pen within reach in case something urgent needed to be written. While Victoria sighed with frustration every time she had to repeat something, Grace never lost her calm, not even when he needed several explanations for simple tasks. The difference between their attitudes was so clear that Daniel began to notice details he had once overlooked. Daily routines became more complicated than he had imagined. Each morning, Grace woke him with a gentle touch on the shoulder, since he could not hear the alarm, and prepared his breakfast, which he ate in silence while reading the financial press. Victoria usually slept late, justifying it by saying that the previous nights had been exhausting because of the care Daniel required. During meals, there was hardly any conversation. She left him brief notes about her plans or social commitments, while Grace communicated through attentive gestures and warm notes that included small details about her day. In the afternoons, when Daniel tried to work from home, Victoria often went shopping or met with friends, leaving him alone with Grace, who quietly organized his space and brought him coffee without him having to ask. Those simple attentions began to create a sense of calm and understanding that contrasted sharply with the tension he felt whenever Victoria was nearby. Weekends revealed even more clearly the cracks in his relationship with Victoria and the growing emotional closeness with Grace. Victoria insisted on maintaining her social life, taking him to dinners and events where he felt like a silent spectator in his own life. She spoke for him, decided for him, and presented him as someone who inspired sympathy. At those gatherings, Daniel noticed the uncomfortable looks when he tried to participate and how Victoria immediately stepped in to explain his situation. Yet when they returned home, it was Grace who welcomed him with a sincere smile, who asked him in writing how the evening had gone, and who showed genuine interest in how he felt. On Sunday afternoons, while Victoria did her nails or talked on the phone, Grace and Daniel created a quiet ritual in the garden. She watered the plants while he read, occasionally exchanging looks and smiles that felt closer than any conversation he had shared with Victoria in months. The appearance of normalcy that Daniel presented to others began to feel heavier with each passing day. He felt it most acutely as he realized that the people closest to him were treating him in very different ways. Victoria started making important decisions without consulting him, convinced that his condition made him less capable of handling complex matters. She canceled meetings in his name, declined social invitations without asking him, and spoke about him as if he were a child who needed constant protection. His business associates, who had once sought him out for advice or potential partnerships, stopped calling him directly and preferred to communicate with Victoria about anything related to him. By contrast, Grace treated him the same way she had from the very first day, with respect, dignity, and genuine attention to his thoughts and feelings. When Daniel wrote long notes to express his frustrations or concerns, she read them calmly and replied with thoughtful comments, showing that she had understood every word. On lonely nights, when Victoria went out with her friends saying she needed a break, Daniel sought the quiet company of Grace. She worked nearby with a calm presence, creating an atmosphere of peace he had not felt since before the accident. What Daniel did not realize was that he would soon have the chance to hear what both women truly thought of him. After 6 months of living in silence, Dr. Reynolds asked Daniel to come in for a routine follow-up that would change everything. In his private office at St. Joseph Medical Center, the specialist reviewed the latest test results with a look of surprise Daniel had never seen before. Using gestures and diagrams, he explained that the inflammation in the inner ear had decreased significantly and that there was a possibility of regaining part of his hearing through an experimental procedure. Daniel felt as though he had been offered a second chance at life, although the doctor was clear from the beginning. The treatment would involve multiple therapy sessions and very specific medications, with no guarantee of complete success. Even so, there was something in the doctor's expression that conveyed hope, a professional confidence Daniel had not sensed in months. Victoria, who accompanied him to the appointment, reacted with restrained emotion and immediately asked about the cost and duration of the treatment. Grace, who was there to support him, smiled through tears and took Daniel's hands with genuine joy. The drive home was quiet, yet filled with a renewed sense of hope he had not felt in a long time. The treatment began right away, with sessions 3 times a week at a specialized medical clinic in Dallas, Texas. Daniel received injections directly into his ear, a painful procedure that began to show results after the 3rd week. At first, he perceived strange buzzing sounds, as if someone were trying to tune an old radio. Then distorted sounds followed, slowly becoming clearer. Victoria accompanied him to some sessions but complained constantly about how long they lasted and how uncomfortable the medical setting was. By contrast, Grace never missed an appointment and waited patiently through the 2 hours each procedure required. Dr. Reynolds monitored every improvement with hearing tests that showed slow but steady progress. In the 5th week, Daniel heard his own voice for the first time in months. The emotion was so intense that he could not hold back his tears. The doctor's words began to reach his ears like distant murmurs, but they were real sounds, not the absolute silence he had grown used to. Victoria celebrated the news with a smile that seemed more like relief than genuine happiness. Grace, on the other hand, whispered a prayer of gratitude that Daniel could faintly hear, filling him with an emotion that was difficult to describe. By the end of the 8th week of treatment, Daniel had recovered about 70% of his hearing, enough to hold normal conversations and clearly hear everyday sounds. Dr. Reynolds explained that it was the best outcome he had seen in similar cases, though he warned that ongoing medication and maintenance therapy would still be necessary. That news should have been an immediate cause for celebration, but something inside Daniel made him pause and reflect. During the months of silence, he had observed gestures and attitudes he had never noticed before, especially the profound differences between Victoria and Grace. Now that he could hear again, he had a unique opportunity. He could find out what people truly thought of him when they believed he could not hear them. An idea began to take shape in his mind. What if he pretended he was still deaf to learn the truth about those around him? Curiosity and a growing intuition about Victoria's true intentions led him to make a decision that would change his life forever. That night, after thinking it over for hours, Daniel made a decision. He would keep his recovered hearing a secret. Hiding his improvement turned out to be easier than he had expected, because everyone around him was already used to communicating with him through gestures and written notes. Daniel continued to respond the same way, pretending not to notice the sounds that were now reaching his ears clearly. During family meals, he kept the same attentive expression as he read lips, even though he was actually hearing every word spoken around him. Victoria noticed no change in his behavior and continued with her usual routine. She wrote brief messages, talked on the phone in his presence, and acted as if he were still living in complete silence. Grace did not suspect anything either. She kept her usual patience and continued communicating with him through notes and caring gestures. Dr. Reynolds agreed to keep the medical secret when Daniel explained that he needed time to process his new reality before sharing it with his family. The first weeks of that deception were emotionally exhausting, but Daniel felt he was on the verge of discovering important truths. Sound had returned to his life, and now he would use it as a tool to find out who truly loved him. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel created a flawless routine to maintain his facade. In the mornings, when Victoria believed he was sleeping deeply, he listened to her phone conversations from the bed, remaining perfectly still while she spoke freely. During the day, he sat in his study pretending to review work documents, while in reality he was paying attention to everything happening in the house. Grace continued with her household tasks and sometimes hummed soft melodies under her breath. Daniel listened calmly, enjoying a sense of peace he had not felt in a long time. The conversations between Victoria and her friends, when they came to visit, became especially revealing. They spoke without restraint, convinced that he could not hear anything. Amid comments about parties, shopping, and social gossip, references to Daniel's situation began to surface, unsettling him. As the days passed, Daniel realized he had been living inside a bubble that had hidden many painful truths about his surroundings. At the same time, he began to notice small details about Grace that brought him an unexpected warmth. Her morning prayers, in which she thanked God for being able to help a good man, and her calls with her mother, where she spoke lovingly about her work, revealed a sensitivity he had never noticed before. What he was about to hear that night would change his heart forever. One Thursday evening, Victoria arrived home late from a dinner with her friends from the country club. She came in clearly irritated and a few drinks in. Daniel pretended to be asleep as she crossed the room talking on the phone with Lauren, not bothering to lower her voice because she believed he could not hear her. "I can't stand this situation anymore," Victoria said as she kicked off her high heels with sharp, irritated movements. "Living with a useless man who can't even hold a normal conversation is driving me crazy." A sharp pain shot through Daniel's chest, but he remained motionless, breathing slowly so as not to give himself away. "My friends keep asking me why I'm still with him," Victoria continued. "What am I supposed to tell them? That I'm going to marry a deaf man who depends on me for everything?" The contempt in her voice was something Daniel had never heard before. She sounded as if she were talking about an inconvenience, not the man she had planned to marry. The next words were even harsher. "If it weren't for the inheritance and the properties, I would have left a long time ago." The conversation went on as Victoria undressed and got ready for bed, revealing a side of her personality that shattered any romantic illusion Daniel still held. "And now everyone looks at us with pity at parties," she complained as she removed the diamond earrings he had given her. "We're not the envied couple we used to be. Now we're an example of what no one ever wants to become." Daniel listened to every word with a mix of pain and a strange sense of clarity, as if he were finally seeing Victoria without the filter of blind love. "Lauren, I swear there are days when I feel like screaming at him to hire a nurse and let me live my life," she added while applying face cream in front of the mirror. "But the lawyer explained that if I leave him now, before the wedding, I won't be entitled to any of his fortune." The cold way she spoke about money and benefits, while Daniel lay just a few feet away pretending to sleep, revealed the true nature of the woman with whom he had planned to share his life. This was not love. It was a financial investment, not a genuine feeling. The cruelest words came when Victoria began mocking Daniel's physical condition and how it had changed his social life. "Do you remember what he used to be like?" she said with a bitter laugh. "So confident, dominating every conversation, being the center of attention at every event. Now, according to her, he was different. It's like carrying a ghost everywhere," she added. "He just nods and smiles like an idiot because he has no idea what's going on around him." Each sentence struck Daniel like a slap. At the same time, he began to understand that the woman lying beside him was a stranger. Victoria kept talking without restraint. "My parents keep asking when we're going to set a wedding date, and I don't know what to tell them," she said. "How do I explain that I don't want to marry someone who's going to be a burden for the rest of my life?" The call lasted nearly an hour. During that time, Victoria poured out complaints, frustrations, and plans in which there was no trace of love. She spoke about maintaining the relationship only until she found an elegant way out of it, preferably after securing some form of financial compensation. The woman who had promised to stand by him under any circumstances was planning to abandon him at his most vulnerable moment. The final blow came when she began comparing him to other men in her circle, especially Ethan Brooks, a divorced businessman who had been flirting with her at recent events. "Ethan knows how to treat a woman," she said with a sigh. "Last week he sent me flowers for no special reason. When we talk, he looks me in the eyes and actually listens to me, not like Daniel, who just nods without understanding anything." Daniel had to make a tremendous effort not to confront her. He remained motionless, controlling his breathing, while she continued destroying every happy memory they had shared. "He invited me to spend the weekend at his house in Lake Tahoe, and I told him I'd think about it. What do you think?" The ease with which she considered being unfaithful, while he pretended to sleep beside her, confirmed that their relationship had been a lie long before the accident. Victoria was not only thinking about leaving him because of his condition, she was already evaluating replacements with a coldness that left him frozen. The conversation ended with plans to meet Ethan the following week, supposedly to talk about business, something she would later tell Daniel. When Victoria hung up the phone and fell asleep, Daniel spent the night awake, absorbing the devastating truth he had just uncovered. The woman who smiled at him in the mornings and wrote him affectionate notes considered him a useless burden and was planning to betray him in the cruelest possible way. Every false touch, every rehearsed smile, and every whispered "I love you" over the past months had been part of an act to maintain access to the fortune he had built through years of work. Even so, in the midst of the pain, Daniel felt something unexpected. A sense of clarity and freedom, as if he had finally awakened from a long deception. Now he knew exactly who Victoria was, an ambitious, unscrupulous woman who had seen his misfortune as an economic opportunity, not a chance to prove genuine love. The tears that ran down his face that night were born both from the pain of betrayal and from the relief of having discovered the truth before making the biggest mistake of his life. What Daniel did not know was that the next day he would hear words capable of healing his heart in a way he never could have imagined. The following morning, he woke with a mix of pain and determination. He pretended to follow his usual routine, got up slowly, and went to the bathroom while Victoria was still asleep, maintaining the same appearance of dependence as always. Grace was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. She hummed softly, a song Daniel could now hear with complete clarity, a melody that brought him unexpected peace after the emotional storm of the night before. When she saw him enter, she smiled at him with her usual warmth and wrote in her notebook, "Good morning, Mr. Wright. How did you sleep?" He responded with gestures, just as he had for months, but this time he observed every detail. Grace moved around the kitchen with calm ease, a genuine beauty that had nothing to do with forced elegance, but with something that came from within. As she prepared the eggs exactly the way he liked them, Daniel noticed that she paid attention to every detail not out of obligation, but out of sincere care, a sharp contrast to the learned coldness of Victoria. Give this video a like if you are enjoying the story and want to support our channel. Victoria came downstairs for breakfast later, impeccable as always, but wearing that rigid smile Daniel now recognized as completely false. "Good morning, my love," Victoria said, kissing him on the cheek. The kiss felt cold, almost distant. Then she wrote in the notebook, "How are you feeling today? You look like you did not sleep well." Her eyes, however, showed no real concern, only the automatic performance of a role she had been playing for months. During breakfast, Victoria casually mentioned that she would be meeting some supposed clients that afternoon to review wedding dress catalogs. Daniel recognized the lie immediately, after having heard her real plans the night before. Grace served the coffee in silence, but he noticed how she looked away every time Victoria spoke about the wedding. There was something in Grace's expression that suggested she had also sensed inconsistencies in the fiancé's behavior. Even so, out of respect and discretion, she never said anything. The tension at the table was unmistakable, although only Daniel could fully feel it, trapped between Victoria's forced performance and Grace's quiet authenticity. When Victoria excused herself to get ready and left them alone, the atmosphere changed immediately. Everything became warmer and more natural. That afternoon would bring a moment that would forever transform Daniel's idea of true love. Victoria left the house pretending to go to a work meeting, but he knew she was actually meeting Ethan. By mid-afternoon, she returned accompanied by Lauren and another woman Daniel did not recognize. The three of them walked in laughing and speaking loudly. Daniel was in his study pretending to read documents, but he heard every word clearly. "I'm honestly exhausted by this situation," Victoria said as she poured glasses of wine. "I can't keep carrying a responsibility that isn't mine." Lauren responded with a cruel laugh. "Oh, Victoria, but think about all the money you'll secure when you marry him. It's worth putting up with it a little longer." The third woman, clearly new to the group, asked with curiosity, "But does he really not hear anything at all? Can we talk freely?" Victoria answered with contempt. "Nothing. He's completely deaf. It's like having an expensive piece of furniture in the house." The laughter that followed felt like knives to Daniel, but what came next was even worse. The conversation grew harsher, reaching a level of cruelty he never would have believed possible in the woman who claimed to love him. "Now I have to pretend I care about writing him little romantic notes and accompanying him to his boring therapies," Victoria complained as she walked through the living room with her glass in hand. "Before, being with him was fun, but now it's like caring for a helpless adult." "At least you have that girl, Grace, who takes care of almost everything," Lauren added. Victoria snorted with disdain. "She thinks she's some kind of saint, always hovering around him like he's someone special. It disgusts me how she looks at him, like she feels sorry for him or something worse." Daniel's blood began to boil as he heard the racist tone she used when referring to Grace, revealing even more of her true nature. "Honestly," Victoria continued, "sometimes I think she's in love with him, the poor fool. As if someone like Daniel would ever look twice at a housekeeper." Laughter filled the house, but at that exact moment, something unexpected happened. Grace appeared in the doorway of the living room. She had heard the last comments. What followed would be a display of courage and dignity that Daniel would never forget. With her apron still on and her face flushed with indignation, Grace stepped in front of Victoria with a firmness that silenced everyone in the room. "Excuse me, Mrs. Hale, but I cannot stay quiet after hearing that," she said, her voice trembling yet steady. "Mr. Wright is a good, generous, and honorable man. He does not deserve to be spoken about that way, especially not by someone who claims to love him." Victoria, startled by the interruption, tried to intimidate her. "How dare you interfere in conversations that do not concern you? You are just an employee." Grace did not back down. "Yes, I am an employee, but I am also a woman with dignity. I will not allow anyone to speak that way about a person I admire and respect." Her words echoed powerfully through the house. Daniel had never heard a defense like that before, not even back when he could hear. "Mr. Wright is worth more than all of us combined," Grace continued. "Not because of his money, but because of his heart. And any woman who cannot see that does not deserve to stand by his side." The silence that followed was heavy, almost unbearable, but Grace was not finished. "If you cannot value the wonderful man standing right in front of you, then the problem is not him. It is you." Daniel's heart was pounding so hard that he thought they might all hear it. Grace's words stayed with him for days, like a melody that refused to fade. Never before had anyone defended him with such sincerity and courage, especially someone who had nothing to gain from doing so. Victoria was so furious after the confrontation that she locked herself in her room for hours, refusing to speak to anyone and threatening to fire Grace immediately. However, Daniel intervened by writing a clear, firm note. "Grace stays. This matter is closed." Victoria accepted it reluctantly, but from that moment on, the atmosphere in the house became even more tense and artificial. During meals, she barely addressed Grace, treating her with a coldness that bordered on open hostility. By contrast, Daniel began to see his housekeeper in a different light. He started noticing details he had previously overlooked, trapped in his silence and his own self-pity. The way Grace moved through the house with natural grace, the genuine brightness in her eyes when she smiled, and above all, the fact that she had risked her job to defend him without expecting anything in return. It was as if he had been blind all those months. The days that followed became a constant revelation of Grace's extraordinary character, someone Daniel had completely underestimated. In the mornings, while she prepared breakfast, he listened to the traditional live music she hummed softly. They were melodies filled with hope and faith, warming the kitchen in stark contrast to the coldness Victoria had brought into the home. Grace had a gentle yet firm voice that reflected her character. Soft on the surface, with deep strength underneath. On Sundays, when she spoke on the phone with her mother, Daniel overheard conversations filled with family love, respect, and genuine values that reminded him of what truly mattered in life. "Mom, I'm fine. Work is calm, and Mr. Wright is a very good person," she said with a tenderness that touched something deep inside him. In those conversations, she also spoke about her dreams. She wanted to study nursing to help others. She was saving every single dollar so her younger brother could attend college. She always ended by thanking God for having work and good health. The humility and nobility of her aspirations contrasted painfully with the superficial, material ambitions Daniel now recognized in Victoria. The change in his feelings was not just mental. It was physical and emotional. He began to look forward anxiously to the moments when Grace entered his study to clean or bring him coffee. He pretended to focus on documents, but in reality, he watched her every movement with growing fascination. She folded clothes carefully, without vanity. She organized books with an evident respect for knowledge. Sometimes, when she thought he was not watching, she paused to read the titles with curiosity. One afternoon, Daniel caught her flipping through one of his history books about Mexico, her look of concentration unexpectedly captivating. When Grace realized that he had seen her, she blushed and wrote him a note to apologize. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wright. I like to read, but I did not want to touch your things without permission." He replied in writing that she was welcome to take any book that interested her. The grateful smile she gave him in return brightened his entire day. In the afternoons, when Grace watered the plants in the garden, Daniel found himself inventing excuses to step out onto the terrace just to watch her. He observed how she spoke softly to the flowers, as if they were living beings worthy of care and affection. The contrast between the two women became more evident with each passing day, especially during the difficult moments of his social readjustment. When he had follow-up medical appointments, Victoria almost always found excuses not to go with him. She claimed social commitments or beauty appointments she considered more important. In those moments, Grace immediately offered to accompany him. She waited patiently during the consultations and showed genuine interest in his progress. After the appointments, Victoria asked automatically how it had gone, without truly waiting for an answer. Grace, on the other hand, carefully read the notes about what the doctor had said and asked thoughtful questions that showed real concern for his well-being. On difficult nights, when Daniel had nightmares about the accident or felt overwhelmed by frustration, Victoria limited herself to complaining that his movements woke her up and went to sleep in the guest room. Grace, by contrast, seemed to sense those moments of distress without needing words. She appeared quietly with a cup of chamomile tea and a simple note saying that tomorrow would be better or that God had beautiful plans for him. Those small gestures of sincere understanding began to heal wounds in Daniel's heart, wounds he had not even known existed. The final revelation came on a rainy April night. Daniel realized he had been searching for love in the wrong place for years. Victoria had gone out to dinner with her friends, likely lying once again about her true plans. He was in the library, reading in silence, while listening to the calm sound of rain hitting the windows. Grace came in to collect the teacups she had served earlier that afternoon. When she thought Daniel was not watching, she stopped in front of the large family portrait hanging on the wall. It was a photograph of Daniel with his parents, taken before the accident. In it, he looked smiling and full of life. Grace studied it for several minutes with infinite tenderness, then murmured very softly, "What a beautiful man, my God. One day he will smile like that again." At that moment, Daniel understood something with a clarity that took his breath away. He had fallen deeply in love with a woman who cared for him not for what he had, but for who he truly was. Grace saw qualities in him that Victoria had never recognized, even when he was at the height of his success. And she had been willing to risk everything to defend him when he needed it most. The feeling growing in his chest was unlike anything he had experienced before. It was not the superficial attraction he had felt for Victoria, but the certainty of having found his soulmate in the most unexpected person. That night, Daniel made the bravest decision of his life. He would tell her the truth about his hearing, no matter the consequences. The moment came 3 days later, during a powerful thunderstorm that struck Dallas, Texas with unusual intensity. Victoria had traveled to Santa Fe, New Mexico, supposedly to attend a fashion exhibition, but Daniel knew, from the conversations he had overheard, that she had actually gone away with Ethan for a romantic weekend. The irony was impossible to ignore. While his fiancée was betraying him without shame, he was about to confess the most important truth of his life to the woman he truly loved. Lightning flashed intermittently over the private residence in Highland Park, Dallas, creating an almost unreal atmosphere, as if everything had been arranged for that decisive moment. Grace was in the kitchen preparing dinner when the power went out and the house was plunged into darkness. Daniel heard her careful footsteps as she searched for candles and flashlights, and her gentle voice saying, "Do not worry, Mr. Wright. I will be right back with some light." Even in the darkness, she thought of him first. Daniel knew then that this was the moment he had been waiting for. They were alone, without distractions, facing the most important conversation of their lives. When Grace returned to the dining room carrying several lit candles, her face was bathed in a warm glow that made her look serene and beautiful. Daniel quite literally lost his breath. The golden light of the flames danced in her brown eyes, reflecting something pure and deep. She wrote in her notebook, her handwriting careful and neat. "I found these candles in the pantry. The power should come back soon, but in the meantime we can have dinner like this. Is that all right with you?" Daniel nodded, but for the first time in months, he did not respond immediately with gestures. He kept looking at her with an intensity that made Grace blush slightly. She set the table with her usual care, arranging plates and cutlery with attention to every detail. During dinner, they communicated as they always did. She wrote questions about his day, and he answered with gestures. Yet something in the air felt different. An emotional tension they both sensed, even if neither could explain it. Thunder continued to rumble outside, but inside the house, lit only by candlelight, an intimacy had formed that Daniel had never experienced before. The outside world seemed to disappear, leaving them alone in a warm bubble of light where only the two of them existed. After dinner, while Grace was clearing the plates, Daniel made the decision he knew would change everything. He stepped closer and gently touched her arm to get her attention. When she turned toward him, Daniel spoke out loud for the first time since the accident. "Grace, I need to tell you something very important." The look of absolute shock on her face was impossible to describe. The plates she was holding nearly slipped from her hands. "Mr. Wright, can you hear?" she whispered, her voice trembling, as if she could not believe it. He nodded slowly, feeling his eyes fill with tears. "I can hear, Grace. I recovered my hearing weeks ago, but I chose to keep it a secret." She brought her hands to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears, a mix of joy and confusion. "Why? Why didn't you tell us?" The question came with the same honesty and simplicity that defined her. Daniel knew he had to be completely truthful, even if it hurt. "I needed to know who loved me for who I am, not for what I have." The conversation that followed was the most honest and emotional Daniel had ever had in his adult life. He explained everything as they sat together on the living room sofa, the candles creating an intimate, almost confessional atmosphere. During those months of apparent silence, Daniel had heard things that opened his eyes to the people around him. Grace listened with complete attention, looking straight at him, her face reflecting a mix of understanding and concern. "I heard Victoria talking on the phone with her friends," he continued. "I discovered that she was only with me for the money, that she saw me as a useless burden, and that she planned to leave me as soon as she found a way to do it without losing the inheritance." Tears streamed freely down Grace's cheeks, not out of weakness, but from the indignation stirred by such cruel words. "But I also heard something wonderful," Daniel added, moving a little closer. "I heard you defending me with a courage I had never seen in anyone. I heard you speaking about me with kindness when you thought I could not hear you. I heard you praying for me, singing to bring joy into the house, and treating me with a dignity that even my own fiancé never gave me." The silence that followed was deep, heavy with emotions they had both carried for months. The moment reached its peak when Daniel found the courage to say out loud what he had felt since the night Grace had defended him. He gently took her hands. "All this time, you have been my light in the darkness, my hope when everything seemed lost. I have watched you, I have listened to you, and I have fallen in love with you in a way I never thought possible." She looked at him with tears filling her eyes. Her breathing was uneven, a mix of joy and fear. "Mr. Wright, I do not know what to say," she whispered. "I have always felt something special for you, but I never imagined you could see me that way. I am just a housekeeper. You are an important man, educated, financially secure. He interrupted her gently. You are the most noble, brave, and beautiful woman I have ever known. Your heart is worth more than any title or fortune. Under the golden candlelight, with the storm as their witness, they both knew they had crossed an invisible boundary. I love you, Grace, Daniel said with a certainty he had never felt before. And I believe you love me too. She nodded through tears. Yes, I love you, Mr. Wright. I have loved you for a long time. However, they did not know that their happiness was about to be tested in the harshest possible way. On Monday morning, Victoria returned from her trip with Ethan, visibly irritated. Her bad mood was obvious, as if things had not gone the way she expected. Daniel resumed pretending to be deaf to avoid premature confrontations, even though, after confessing his love to Grace, maintaining that facade was becoming increasingly difficult. During breakfast, Victoria wrote sharp comments about how boring the supposed fashion exhibition had been and how disappointing the business contacts she claimed to have made turned out to be. Daniel, however, sensed something different in her attitude. A nervous tension that had not been there before, as if she were assessing his every move with suspicion. Grace served the coffee with her usual calm, but there was a special sparkle in her eyes. A sparkle only Daniel knew how to read. It was the reflection of the secret love they now shared. Throughout the week, they found ways to communicate through knowing glances and small gestures that went unnoticed by Victoria, yet built an emotional intimacy that filled Daniel with a happiness he had not known in years. Even so, Victoria began asking strange questions. She showed an insistent interest in his routine, his therapy schedules, and above all, the time he spent alone with Grace. Her distrust grew in the days that followed. She started noticing details she had previously ignored. How Daniel smiled more when Grace was nearby. How his eyes followed her when she moved around the room. And most of all, how he reacted with more enthusiasm to the notes Grace wrote him than to her own. There is something strange going on here, Victoria said on the phone to Lauren one afternoon, while Daniel pretended to read in his study, even though he was listening to every word. He is different, more alive. And that housekeeper is acting strangely too, like she knows something I do not. Lauren suggested that maybe she was imagining things because of stress, but Victoria was not convinced. She began to test him. She spoke loudly when she believed he was not paying attention. She dropped objects suddenly to see if he would react. She even played music at a high volume without warning him in writing. Daniel had to rely on every ounce of willpower not to react. He maintained his act of deafness while feeling the tension inside the house grow with each passing day. Still, the love he now shared with Grace gave Daniel the strength he needed to endure Victoria's increasingly obvious hostility. Even so, the situation reached a breaking point on a Friday night, when Victoria made a cold, calculated decision. Without telling anyone, she discreetly hired the services of a private investigator to monitor the house during her supposed absence. To justify it, she invented another business trip. In reality, she did not leave the city. She stayed at a nearby hotel, from where she personally coordinated the surveillance operation, determined to confirm the suspicions that had been keeping her awake at night. The investigator, Mark Sullivan, arrived at the private residence while Victoria pretended to be away. With precise, professional movements, he installed hidden cameras in the common areas of the house and audio recording devices at strategic points. His mission was clear: to document any suspicious behavior between Daniel and Grace that would confirm what Victoria had been suspecting for days. Throughout the entire weekend, while Victoria pretended to be out of town, Daniel and Grace shared moments of emotional closeness inside the house. There were no exaggerated gestures or dramatic scenes, but there was something far more revealing. The cameras captured ordinary conversations, with Daniel speaking naturally and Grace responding without the need for notes or gestures. That simple dynamic completely contradicted the official version of his deafness. The recordings also captured fragments of intimate conversations. In them, Daniel expressed his love in clear words, and Grace responded with deep tenderness and sincere devotion. Everything was documented. Every glance, every word, every shared silence. By Sunday night, Victoria already had undeniable evidence in her hands. She had not only discovered that Daniel had been pretending to be deaf for weeks, but from her perspective, he had committed an even greater betrayal. He had fallen in love with the housekeeper. The fury she felt did not come from a broken heart. It was not wounded love. It was humiliation. It was the rage of having been deceived and, above all, the fear of seeing her financial plans threatened. What she had uncovered represented a real risk to everything she had been calculating for months. On Monday morning, Victoria returned to the house with a meticulously designed plan. Her goal was not a private conversation or a discreet clarification. She wanted to confront Daniel in the most dramatic and publicly humiliating way possible. To do so, she organized a special breakfast. She invited several of her high society friends, including Lauren, Amanda, and Emily, all wives of influential businessmen who belonged to the most exclusive social circle. She also invited Ethan, whom she introduced as a potential business partner interested in meeting Daniel to discuss future investment opportunities. The dining room table was impeccably set. The finest tableware, carefully selected floral arrangements, and an atmosphere that simulated an elegant celebration. In reality, it was all a carefully constructed trap. When Daniel came down for breakfast, pretending surprise at seeing so many guests, Victoria greeted him with a smile that felt unsettling, almost cold. "Good morning, my love," she said aloud, making sure everyone could hear her, while at the same time writing the greeting in a notebook. "We have special guests today. I hope you do not mind." Grace served the coffee with visibly nervous movements. The presence of so many people and the tension in the air made her feel out of place. Daniel sensed that something serious was about to happen, although he still could not imagine how far Victoria was prepared to go to destroy him in front of witnesses. The explosion came right after the first course. Victoria slowly rose from her seat, picked up a glass of champagne, and held it high. A calculated, almost cruel smile appeared on her face. "Dear friends," she announced in a clear, firm voice, "I have a wonderful surprise to share with you." All eyes turned toward her. Even Daniel felt a knot form in his stomach. "My dear fiancé has been keeping an incredible secret," she continued. It turns out that Daniel is no longer deaf. The silence that followed was absolute. Expressions of shock and confusion spread around the table one by one. "He fully recovered his hearing weeks ago," she added. "But that is not all." With carefully measured cruelty, she continued speaking. "He decided to keep it secret so he could secretly listen to our private conversations." Then she pulled an envelope from her purse. One by one, she began spreading printed photographs and transcripts of the recordings across the table. With open contempt, she added that he had done it to get close to the housekeeper without anyone noticing. The images clearly showed Daniel talking to Grace, intimate scenes captured through a brutal invasion of privacy. Ethan pretended to be surprised, but Daniel immediately noticed that his performance was unconvincing. Grace, who was serving coffee at that moment, dropped the tray. The dull sound echoed through the entire dining room. Her eyes filled with tears, not only from embarrassment, but from deep humiliation. There was no way to keep pretending anymore. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt impossible to breathe. Daniel understood that the most important moment of his life had arrived. With a calm that surprised everyone, he slowly stood up. His posture was firm and dignified. He looked at each person present, meeting every gaze without avoiding a single one. "It is true," he said in a clear, steady voice. "I recovered my hearing several weeks ago, and I decided to keep it a secret." The guests exchanged looks filled with confusion and curiosity. Daniel continued speaking with absolute composure, in sharp contrast to the visible agitation of Victoria. "I did it because I needed to discover who truly loved me for who I am, not for what I have." He let his gaze rest directly on Victoria, who began to pale as she realized that her attempt at humiliation was about to turn against her. During those months of apparent deafness, he had heard conversations that opened his eyes to the true nature of some people who claimed to care about him. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly understanding where Daniel's words were headed. Grace remained standing near the kitchen door. Tears streamed down her face, but she kept her head held high, ready to face any consequence of her love. The direct confrontation with Victoria was inevitable and brutally honest, exposing truths that left her laid bare in front of her own friends. "Victoria," Daniel said with a calm that sent a chill through the room, "I heard every cruel word you said about me on the phone with Lauren. I heard you call me useless, complain about having to carry me as a burden, and most of all, talk about how you plan to leave me as soon as you found an elegant way to do it without losing the inheritance." Victoria's eyes filled with panic as the accusing looks of her friends fixed on her. Daniel continued without raising his voice. "I also heard about your plans with Ethan, the trips you took together while I believed you were attending fashion exhibitions." Ethan tried to stand up to leave, but Daniel stopped him with a single firm, authoritative look. "Stay, Ethan. After all, you are an important part of this story." Lauren, Amanda, and Emily began to whisper among themselves, stunned by revelations they had never imagined about their friend. "The most painful part," Daniel continued, "was not discovering that you did not love me. It was realizing that you never did. Even before the accident, I was nothing more than a status symbol to you." Victoria tried to defend herself, stammering words without order. "Daniel, you do not understand, He interrupted her firmly. "I understand perfectly. And I consider myself fortunate to have discovered your true nature before marrying you." The most powerful moment came when Daniel publicly defended his love for Grace in front of the entire high society audience gathered there. "Yes, I fell in love with Grace," he declared without a trace of shame, turning toward her with a smile full of sincere love. "I fell in love with a woman who saw me as a human being when I doubted my own worth. With someone who defended me with courage when all of you looked at me with pity." Grace lifted her head with pride. She wiped away her tears, her dignity fully intact. "I fell in love with someone who never asked for anything in return. Who cared for me without expecting a reward. Who sang to bring joy into my home and prayed for my well-being when she believed no one could hear her." The women present shifted uncomfortably. Some were visibly moved by the sincerity of his words. Amanda murmured that she had never heard a man speak that way about a woman. Emily nodded, looking at Victoria with open disdain. "Grace is worth more than any woman in our society," Daniel continued, "because her heart is pure, her love is genuine, and her courage is unbreakable. If that seems scandalous to you, the problem is not mine. It belongs to a society that values money more than character." Desperate to regain control, Victoria shouted. "She is a housekeeper. You cannot humiliate yourself like that." Daniel looked at her with pity. "The only person who has humiliated herself here is you, Victoria, with your greed, your betrayal, and your complete lack of dignity." The final break came with a symbolic gesture that would echo for years in the social circles. Daniel stepped toward Victoria, who was still standing there, frozen between rage and shock, and extended his hand. "Give me the ring." "What ring?" she asked with a trembling voice, even though she knew perfectly well which one he meant. "The engagement ring I gave you when I believed you loved me. You no longer have the right to wear it." With shaking hands, Victoria removed the diamond engagement ring worth several $100,000, the symbol of a future that had just collapsed. As she handed it over, Daniel took it without looking at her and walked straight toward Grace, who was watching him with tears of disbelief and emotion. "Grace," he said, kneeling in front of her before the stunned eyes of everyone present. "Will you be my wife? Not because I have money, but because you have the most beautiful heart I have ever known." The silence lasted for several long seconds. Then, her voice breaking with emotion, Grace replied, "Yes, yes, I will be your wife." The spontaneous applause from Amanda and Emily surprised everyone, followed by a standing ovation that filled the dining room. Victoria ran out of the house, followed by Ethan and Lauren. Their flight only confirmed the cowardice of their character. The true friends stayed. The rest of the morning turned into an improvised celebration, unexpected, but infinitely more genuine than any elegant event held in the past. Amanda, always the most critical of the group, was the first to approach Grace and congratulate her with sincere warmth. "My dear, any woman capable of inspiring that kind of love in a man is an extraordinary woman," Emily said with a warm smile. Amanda added, "Today we witnessed something very special. True love is not something you see every day." Even some of the other women, who at first had been stunned by what happened, began to talk with Grace naturally. Little by little, they discovered her intelligence, her simple grace, and a genuine kindness that did not need to pretend. Daniel watched these exchanges with deep satisfaction. Seeing the woman he loved recognized for the qualities he had admired in silence for months gave him a peace he had never felt before. Throughout the afternoon, the guests gradually began to leave, saying goodbye to the new couple with sincere blessings and promises of support. The house, which for so long had been a stage for falseness and pain, was filled for the first time in a long while with genuine laughter and conversations full of hope. Ethan never returned. Later, it became known that he had fled the city that same night, burdened with debts to several creditors who had financed his lifestyle. Daniel and Grace had gained far more than love. They had gained respect, admiration, and above all, the freedom to live their truth without masks or lies. 6 months after that unforgettable day, the Sacred Heart Church in Dallas was filled with a joy so pure it seemed to touch the heavens. Daniel and Grace chose to celebrate their wedding in a simple yet profound way, surrounded only by the people who truly mattered in their lives. Maria, Grace's mother, arrived from New Mexico wearing a navy blue dress her daughter had bought especially for the occasion. Tears of happiness streamed down her face as she watched her daughter walk toward the altar. Lucas, Grace's younger brother, now a university student thanks to Daniel's support, served as best man, pride evident in every one of his movements. Amanda and Emily sat in the front row. During the months of preparation, they had built a genuine friendship with Grace. Dr. Reynolds was also present, smiling with the satisfaction of having been an indirect part of that love story. The church, decorated with traditional flowers, created an atmosphere that celebrated both love and the cultural roots Grace had brought into Daniel's life. When the bells began to ring, announcing the start of the ceremony, everyone present knew they were about to witness something truly extraordinary. Grace walked toward the altar on the arm of Thomas, a close family friend who had taken on the role of a father in that meaningful moment. She wore a simple, elegant wedding dress, free of excess, highlighting her natural beauty and serenity. Waiting for her beside the priest, Daniel could not hold back his tears as he watched her approach. In his mind, every memory rushed back at once: that first morning when Grace arrived to work in his home, the months of silence, the pain, the discovery of true love, and finally, this moment of complete happiness. The vows they exchanged were written by them alone. There were no rehearsed phrases or empty formalities, only sincere words that came straight from the heart. "Grace," Daniel said in a clear voice, "you did not only give me back my hearing. You gave me back the ability to listen to my own heart. You taught me that true love makes no noise, that it is proven in silence, day after day, through small gestures filled with meaning." She replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "Daniel, you taught me that a person's worth is not measured by what they have, but by who they are. With you, I learned that love knows no social differences. It only recognizes hearts that find each other and love without conditions." When the priest spoke the final words and declared them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was accompanied by applause and tears of joy that filled every corner of the church. The celebration continued at their private residence in Highland Park, Dallas, transformed for the occasion into a space that reflected the new life Daniel and Grace had built together. The gardens that Grace had cared for with such devotion during her time as a housekeeper now bloomed with special intensity, as if they too were celebrating their love. The gathering was intimate, yet filled with genuine joy. Traditional music filled the air with traditional melodies that drew everyone to the dance floor. Maria laughed like never before, dancing with Thomas and sharing childhood stories about Grace that sparked heartfelt laughter. Lucas, Grace's younger brother, gave a deeply moving speech. He thanked Daniel for changing not only his sister's life, but the life of their entire family, allowing him to study and move closer to his dream of becoming an engineer. Amanda and Emily, who over time had become Grace's closest friends, organized traditional games and made sure every moment felt special. During dinner, Daniel announced that he had created a private educational foundation to support young people from underserved backgrounds in gaining access to higher education, a project they would lead together and that reflected the values they now shared. The most emotional moment of the celebration came when Daniel asked all the guests to gather in the main living room for a special announcement. He took Grace's hand and spoke in a calm voice. "Dear friends, 1 year ago I lost something I believed was essential in my life, my hearing. But God had much better plans for me." His voice broke slightly with emotion. "By losing my hearing, I gained the ability to truly see people. I learned to distinguish between sincere love and falsehood. In Grace, I found not only the woman of my life, but my soulmate, my partner, and my inspiration to become better every day." She blushed as applause filled the room, but Daniel was not finished. "Today, I want to share one more piece of news. We are expecting our first child." Joy erupted instantly. There were hugs, tears, and congratulations that seemed endless. Maria was the first to embrace her daughter, whispering prayers of gratitude for all the blessings that had come to their family. Dr. Reynolds joked that he had never seen a medical case with such a happy ending. As the celebration continued late into the night, Daniel and Grace stepped away for a moment alone on the balcony. From there, they gazed at the lights of Dallas, Texas glowing in the distance, knowing they had found something far more valuable than any fortune. A genuine love that had overcome every trial. As for Victoria, high society rumors claimed she was set to marry Ethan, but he fled, leaving her with six-figure personal debts and a ruined reputation. She was forced to sell her jewelry and move to a modest neighborhood, working as a sales associate in a boutique. On a few occasions, Daniel and Grace crossed paths with her at social events. They felt no resentment. The betrayal had unknowingly been the path that led them to their true destiny. They learned that sometimes silence is necessary to hear the voice of the heart. This story reminds us that true love always finds its way, that honesty is the foundation of every authentic relationship, and that sometimes our greatest losses become our greatest blessings. Daniel and Grace teach us that a person's value is not measured by social status or a bank account, but by the purity of their heart and the nobility of their actions. If this story touched your heart, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with someone special. May God fill your life with authentic love and guide your path with wisdom. Until the next story.